Hi, welcome to Mark chapter 14. Discussion questions. Okay, I recharged my mic a little bit so that hopefully I should be okay. And it's so funny. I'm thinking about, I wonder if I should edit it out or if I jump in quick enough. But on the Bible study, at least on YouTube, because I'm mic'd up for YouTube, TikTok doesn't need a mic. Um, with the very beginning, I was like going off and talking and my mic wasn't on, which listen, typical me. We're just human over here. We're dripping our coffee. We're not perfect. But okay. So, Mark chapter 14, Bible study questions. Um, so the anointing, right? Anointing him, Jesus, with the perfume. So this act, right? This act of devotion, what does it teach us about worship and sacrifice? So this act that she does, this act of devotion, Um, what does it teach us about worship and sacrifice? And remember, one of my favorite verses to sum this up is Romans 12:1, because he says, present your body as a living sacrifice, for this is true worship. And then worship and service are the same word, right? So depending on the translation that you read, it also would say that this is proper service. So even here, when it says worship, what's the tie between worship and sacrifice? And I would even reference Romans 12:1. This is present your bodies as a living sacrifice, right? For this is worship, this is service. So here, what is she teaching us about worship, service, and sacrifice, right? What it actually looks like. Okay, so then the disciples, right, they were upset at this act of generosity. How does it reflect common attitudes towards giving today? I love that. That's a great question. It's so interesting how people have a negative attitude towards giving, right? Though we live in a world where people are like, we should give more, we should be more generous. But then when people are generous, there's like a sourpuss attitude, or we judge others, or we compare, or we say they didn't give enough, or we don't like what they gave, or we make excuses as to why we shouldn't give and why would God ask us to give. And it's so strange how generosity has this weird relationship, which all it does is again shows us what is wrong with us. Like, what is it revealing about us? Why the heck do we have such a weird, bad attitude about generosity? Right, the common attitudes towards giving today. And then, like I said in Bible study, how can you build your relationship close enough with God to where you don't care what people think, where you're her, you're the her in the story. You're the one that says, I'm going to give above and beyond, even if no one around me does, right? That you don't need the approval of others. You don't need them to be on the same level. It's okay for you to be the one on the same level. Like I said, only one person built the ark. There was only one Noah. There was only one Abraham. Only one person left his nation to build a new nation, right? There's a level of faith. There's only one person here anointing Jesus. So are you going to be that person in the story? Are you going to see the opportunity and then seize the opportunity? Are you going to hesitate? Are you going to doubt? Are you going to look at your peers, feel peer pressure? Maybe I shouldn't do it. They're not doing it. Are you going to step out in faith and do it? So how can you be the person in the story, be the person in your friend group, the person in your family that does the thing that others are too cool to do, are too hesitant to do, or they just don't see it, right? Maybe it's like we're waiting for the approval of others to see the opportunity and they don't see it. We see it. We realize that us having eyes to see means it's our opportunity and ours to take, and we don't need to get other people on board, right? Only Peter stepped out of the boat. They didn't all step out of the boat. We don't need everyone to get on board. That you hear the Lord call and you answer. Right? And then so Jesus defends her. It's interesting. This question's phrased interesting because it says, how does this challenge us to value spiritual devotion over worldly priorities? But I don't feel like that's how Jesus said it, because this question is phrased almost like he's saying, put the spiritual above the worldly, when he was talking about anointing him is more important than uh, feeding the poor, or it's almost phrasing it like that. And I don't think Jesus said it's more important. I think what he said was, you always have that opportunity. This opportunity is one that's coming and going, right? He's not saying that they shouldn't do the other. They should do the other, and they have abundant chances to do the other. And like I said in the Bible study, they need to ask themselves why they haven't done it on any other day. If the poor are always with you, why didn't you care about the poor yesterday or the day before or the day before, right? You're trying to steal an opportunity, right? They're two different opportunities and they both have value. This opportunity, though, Jesus' anointing, is coming and going, right? So this one, it's like, catch it while it's here, do something about it, but don't say that this one shouldn't be done because this one's here, when this one is always here and you can do something about it tomorrow, or say, do something about it today, right? She's pouring out this perfume on their feet and they're going, this could have been given to the poor. Well, why don't you take the plate in front of you and walk outside and give it to the person on the street, disciples? Why don't you do both? Right? As she's anointing Jesus, why can't that perfume be used to anoint Jesus? And why can't you take a little bit out of your pocket and go feed the person sitting outside? Why are you making it either or? Right? So that's what he's calling out, is don't you dare act like because she's doing this, you would have done anything valuable with it. Right? And so anyway, like I said, I'm not sure that I like that question because I don't think Jesus. So I would maybe even say it like that. How can you see the opportunities to draw close to the Lord and seize them, it not necessarily having to be at the expense of anything else? I guess, how can you do both? Because the Lord calls us to care for the poor. He calls us to care for the needy. He says the way you treat those is the way you treat me. And he says, you walked past me, and when I was sick, you didn't take care of me. When I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was in jail, you didn't visit me. And they were like, when did this happen, Lord? And he's like, all the people you pass by, you're passing by me, right? So how they both are a part of his ministry. It's like, how, like, right? Love God, love others. How can you love God? How can you anoint Jesus? How can you make time for God in your day and sacrifice and be devoted to him and worship him? And then also show an extension of that devotion to others, right? From this place, we pour out more into this place. They're not at the expense of each other. Most of us are doing neither. And then the first step would be, people get stuck on just them and the Lord, and they think me and God, I sacrifice to the Lord. And why did he say, if you have a sacrifice for me and you haven't forgiven the people that have wronged you, lay down your sacrifice, go forgive, and come back before you offer it? He's tying the two together, right? So how can you, I guess, make room for both in your life? Be devoted to the Lord, and not see one as an expense of the other, right? Take care of the poor, and don't see that, like, for you to take care of the poor means that you can't tithe or something like that. Or because you tithed, you don't have to take care of the poor, right? How they both exist. Okay, so then immediately after this, Judas agrees to betray Jesus. What do you think motivated him? It's a good question. Put ourselves in the shoes of Judas. What do you think motivated Judas to do this? Was it greed? Was it power? Was it, why do you think he betrayed Jesus? I think about how he did it for money, and even him saying, we heard it in Matthew when he said, whatever you'll give me, I'll do it for whatever price. So that's kind of strange too. Any price. Maybe that just shows how much he missed it. He didn't see the value. And the Lord, I think he thought he was going to get in good. He saw power in religion, the way that they abused their power and lord it over others and oppress others. So he saw this fake sense of power, but he saw power. And then he looks at the Lord, who is supposed to be representative of power, and he's seeing it in his worldly eyes and thinking, this doesn't look like power. You're serving, you're humble, right? You're restrained, rather than realizing restraint is the fullest form of power, of strength. Abuse, recklessness, relentlessness, right? Having no restraint is not power, it is weakness. So he's missing it. It's right in front of him. So I would think that he looks at religion and thinks, I want to be their friend. If I give in to them, they'll give me a seat of power. They'll let me share, I want that life, not this life. I don't want to be walking around not knowing where I'm going to eat. Which is what's crazy is they always had a place to eat. Someone always opened their door. They found a place to lay their head. They had food on their table. Jesus is doing miracles. They're making community and having friendships and having a full life. But we look at that and we think this isn't enough. And that's where the world tricks us. Is you can have a full life and you're telling yourself it's not enough because you think you want more possessions or you want more status. And that is somehow going to be an answer. So anyway, what do you think? Wow, a cloud just came over. It got dark in here. What do you think motivated him? This is interesting. It says, how can we guard our hearts against betrayal and misplaced priorities in our walk with Christ? It's like what I said in the Bible study. I don't think we guard our heart from betrayal. I think having a heart that pushes betrayal away is an ego. Our ego is the one that tries to self-preserve, where Jesus teaches self-sacrifice. We yield, we lose, we submit, right? We surrender. And betrayal is to say, I don't want to be hurt. I don't want you to hurt me, so I'm not going to let you close. Where Jesus lets Judas kiss him on the cheek. He lets him that close. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry that it's like glitching and grainy. But so I don't think that we got our heart from betrayal. And maybe ask yourself, do you feel betrayed right now? Has someone betrayed you? And how can you give it to the Lord to heal your heart and forgive that person so that you don't walk around feeling betrayed? You don't give them that power. Take the power back and let people close, right? Let people close enough. And if that's the cost of letting people close, then that's the cost, right? This is why it's so backwards from everything we learn. We learn that I let people in, they hurt me, so now I have a hardened heart and I push everybody away. And Jesus is like, no, let them in. He lets them in even though they hurt him. He lets us in even though we hurt him. But so I'm trying to think of how to rephrase this question. How do we guard our hearts maybe just against misplaced priorities? How can we prioritize what the Lord prioritizes? That's the summary of the ministry. That's the summary of being a Christian. Prioritizing what he prioritizes, not what we prioritize. Because what is prior? Prior is what we put before everything else, and we should put him before everything else, right? First and foremost, chief, principal, fundamental, foundational. He is prior to all things. He is first. He is our priority. And then when we prefer what he prefers, right? Our will aligned with his will. We prefer what he prefers. We love what he loves because we love him. That is the true transformation. You know you love the Lord when you love what he loves. When you prefer what he prefers, when you prioritize him, and in that you prioritize what he prioritizes. I'm going to keep the first half of the video, hopefully. Gosh, that'll be the next thing, is if I go back to the video and it's not usable. But I'm going to leave the first half of the video, and I remember it cut off at the Lord's Supper, and I was asking the question, why do we think that the Lord waited until now in the story, right, in this chapter, Mark 14, to teach us about the First Supper? And so, right, this is where he's saying, and from, my thoughts, my point of view is that it's happening in real time, right? He's heading to the cross. He's the Passover lamb, right? He's about to be sacrificed. And so he's explaining, like, here's my body that will break. Here's my blood that's going to be shed. He's telling them it's about to happen. I actually am interested now. I'm thinking about it. Jesus declared his death and resurrection 3 times to his disciples, and they had different responses. And they weren't getting it, right? And I guess it doesn't really talk much about them because it focuses more so on Judas and the betrayal that's about to happen. It's did they still not get it? When he literally is saying, this is my body that will be broken for you. This is my blood that will be shed as the blood covenant. Are they getting
He's a Passover lamb. Are they getting that he's headed to the cross? He has said he is. He has said he will be crucified. But I guess maybe from their point of view, there's no evidence, right? Like he says Judas is about to betray me, but otherwise they're thinking, how's this going to be, right? No one has anything against you, right? The religious leaders, which we found out later in the chapter, right? They have nothing. All the false testimonies, they can't find anything. They haven't arrested you, even when Jesus is getting arrested and he says, I've been in front of you every single day and you haven't arrested me until now. Like this is only to fulfill prophecy. So maybe they're just looking and they do not see it. So I think about God being a God of suddenly, and how just like suddenly a blessing comes, even though it's been in the making the whole time. This is where we see like the culmination of events, the pinnacle. It's all adding up. It's all, starting to multiply or get exponential and get to that point, right? So it's like, it seems like it happens out of nowhere, but it's been building the entire time. But anyway, that they're sitting there at dinner, not realizing that the next day he is going to be on a cross, right? Like that quickly. And so think about when we pray and when we want things and we think they're so far away and they could be tomorrow. Tomorrow feels as far away as a year from now. It's like when you're in today and you don't know when the thing is going to come, today can feel really long and you don't realize that the thing's going to happen tomorrow. Like just wait. So anyway, they have no idea he's going to the cross the next day. But so that's what I think is, he didn't need to just go through all their Hebrew traditions, right? It's like everything up until now he has been teaching, he has been undoing their misunderstandings and misinterpretations of the Father, of the law, of the prophecies, right? Like he's explaining so much stuff to them, but that this is the perfect time and way for him to talk about their like feast of unleavened bread, right? All the feasts, because they're in the middle of it, and he can explain those feasts, what they stand for, what the Passover was always about all along, how it's him, right, during Passover week. And then the other thing being that it's his marriage proposal, right? It's like his final piece before he goes to the cross is that he proposes to us. And I talked about this with the Galilean wedding, but how the bridegroom will sip the cup of wine and then hand it to the bride. And if she sips it, she's accepting. So they would have known that, right? He's sipping the wine and then he hands it to them. And then how the bridegroom, after the bride accepts, goes with his father to prepare a place. And so Jesus is saying all of this at the Last Supper too, right? So it's not, he's talking about his body being broken and the blood covenant, right? So the communion piece, the Passover piece, and then he's talking about the wedding, how he is marrying us. He is in a covenant with us, a love covenant with us, right? The soul union to become one, the bond that we have with the Lord that we were always meant for. This is the righteousness, right? This is why he reveals our righteousness. He's revealing as we ought to be. He's revealing our original design, right? It is God revealed, God telling us, showing us the pieces that we couldn't connect, that were made for union, not independence. We're made for dependence. But how anyway, he sips the cup and then he says, I'm going to prepare a place for you, right? And nobody knows when I'll come back. Only the Father knows. That whole thing, it's his marriage proposal. So anyway, that being what's happening at this time, right, with the Lord, with the supper. And so then Jesus is making a new covenant, right? The thing is I don't think we've elaborated on it yet. I'm pretty sure it's in John where he elaborates more on what the new covenant actually is. But what is he even meaning, right? Why is he making a new covenant? And what is the new covenant? Like I said, if you haven't read ahead, if this is your first time, you might not know what the new covenant is. But it's basically what he said. Sorry, y'all. My nose is running. When he said that the law and the prophets are summed up in this, or not law and prophets, that the law is summed up in this, love God, love others. Right? And so we're going to learn that Jesus' new covenant is love. And it's like what he was saying in the Sermon on the Mount. But it's about what's in your heart. What's in your heart, the root system is what grows the fruit. And so quit trying to change the fruit. Quit trying to change the outside, the cosmetic, the veneer, the facade, the face, the surface, to have an image and a perception and to pretend and to be a hypocrite, right? To look a certain way, appear a certain way. But you've got to actually get to the root of the problem. So that's why when everyone's trying to treat the law like a bunch of rules that you can obey and it's behavior modification, he's like, no, it's your heart. It's deeper than that. So he's going to change it, not even change it, fully fulfill it, right? This is why he says, I don't abolish the law, I fulfill the law. It's actually the love, like love is what fills the law and adds to it. It's like making it bigger. I'm so sorry. I'm like, my cup. Gosh, get out of the way. It's what is truly just and truly like accurate and is able to be in alignment with every law while also being the greater truth of our being spirit, right? Again, just how there's no abolishing, there's no getting rid of the law, saying the law was bad. It was saying our misunderstanding of the law and us turning it into something fleshly is just wrong. And to understand from the spirit, from the fruit of the spirit of love, you will transform your heart and your psyche and your inner man, and you will obey the law, right? That's the righteousness. That's the proper order. And so then also communion, just how can you partake in it in your daily living, right? These moments of gratitude and faith. Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me. And so not just at church when they host communion, but knowing that communion means to commune with the Lord, communication, community, right? They're all the same word. And so that you can take moments of remembrance and communion with the Lord. I would even say, listen to the song. It's called Communion. I think it's by Elevation Worship or Maverick City or something. Pretty sure Brandon Lake is singing, and what's her name? Stephanie, like Gretzinger or something. But that you can at any point in time stop and remember the Lord and what he did. And it's like basically saying, think about the cross, think about how his body broke for you and his blood was shed for you. And so that it is a practice for us in our life to just remember him, right? And think of him. If you love him, you think of him. If you love him, he's on your heart. Think about people that you love. You don't have to try to have memories of them. They're on your heart, right? You think of them, you honor them. And so anyway, just to remember him. And then also how they sang hymns, like they sang a hymn after. And so this question is, how does worship help us in times of uncertainty or difficulty? I think that's just an interesting thing to point out. I don't even know if they yet know that they are in times of uncertainty and difficulty. I mean, maybe because they can see that things aren't going their way, right? Like when they're going into the temple courts, when they're going into the city, how they're getting attacked, and it's like starting to get pressure, and they're thinking, wait, this isn't going the way I thought. Like we thought everyone would love us and we'd be popular and everyone would bow down and everyone would be for Jesus, not realizing that people that are insecure feel completely threatened by Jesus. And it's like threatened by grace, threatened by love, threatened by forgiveness, threatened by, and it sounds crazy, right? It's ironic. And again, I can only say it because I was there. When you are in rebellion, you try to push all that stuff away. You don't understand it. You don't want anything to do with it. But especially in insecurity of power. They say they want the Messiah, but the Messiah is going to take their place. And someone's ego does not want that. We don't want to lose our position. And so it's not going the way that they thought. But so how they sang a hymn together, right? It's like they're together. They're having the Passover dinner or the Last Supper, and they worship. And just how does worship help us in times of uncertainty and difficulty? Have you ever even done that? And if not, I would say try it, because worship is my go-to. When my head is spinning, I'm overthinking, I'm paranoid, I don't know what to do in a situation, and there's literally nothing I can do about it. Like thinking isn't going to help. I just put on worship music. And whether it be that I just put my headphones in and I listen to a song and just shift my focus back onto the Lord, or just get filled with his peace, or like invite his presence to fill me up and meet me in that room, right? And like guide me and let me be sensitive to him, and right, just call on him. Or I might go on a walk and just listen to a couple songs, but there's nothing like that. Like just a deep inhale and exhale, some worship songs, you're singing to the Lord, you're remembering who he is, you're praising, and it just puts things into perspective. Honestly, just puts things back into perspective, because we can get so narrow-minded, so tunnel vision, so right, like what is it, you can't see the forest through the trees, like we're so granular, and then it gives you that 30,000 foot view. It brings you back out and gives you perspective, but it also again just gives you peace. It like takes your thoughts and just whoosh, washes them away, right? When we say take our thoughts captive, any pretenses that I have built up against you, and I'm trying to lift my thoughts higher than you and your thoughts, like I take them captive, I cast them down and just put him back in his place. There's just freedom there. There's safety there. It's like, do not believe the lies you're telling yourself. Do not jump to conclusions, all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so Jesus tells the disciples that they will fall away. And how does this show his knowledge of human weakness and his grace? I'd almost say more like, how does it show his grace in his knowledge of human weakness, right? It's like, because he knows the human weakness, that's why there's grace there. Or it at least shows us the grace. This is why it's so important for us to be honest with ourselves and come to the revelation, the realization of our weakness, because then it opens up our eyes to grace. Oh my gosh, God is good. Oh my gosh, he saved me. He like a wretch like me, you know what I mean? It's like he's gonna come love me. He's gonna save me. He's gonna clean me off. He's gonna use me, like someone like me. And then again, I think I mentioned it, but like in the Bible study, but there was a video I was watching, and this guy was saying like, this is what's so different about the Bible from other types of like religious texts and stuff, is the humanity, is that God uses Paul, who was oh my gosh, what was the word? I mean, he obviously murdered Christians, but it was he martyred, right? Martyred Christians, which is funny that they kind of sound the same. But even Peter, right? Peter denies him, and Peter's the one he builds the church on. And then David, knowing the story of King David and knowing it's like all these people, even Abraham, what he did, like they're just messing up. They're us, it's me. How God knows our human weakness. And so when people say, why would God have made us anyway if we were going to mess up? It's like, no, that's what love is. Like saying, why would you have children knowing that they're going to disobey you sometimes, right? Don't you still love them? Aren't they worth having? Isn't their life worth it? Even if there's going to be some correction that has to happen and some guidance and some instruction, and that's the role you take, the responsibility you take in their life. So anyway, just him saying he knows they will fall away. He's looking at these people, loving them, making a marriage covenant, making an offering, a proposal to them, supping with them, right? Like having dinner, sharing stories, his last days with them, loving them, knowing that they are going to abandon him. Right. And so I think about with betrayal, when we talked about how it's easy when someone's kind of like doing fishy stuff and you don't trust them, that you kick them out of your life. But what about this? He'd have to kick everybody out of his life. It's like, if that's how we live, we'd have to kick everybody out of our life if there's no grace for humanity. And so these people, it's like they love him. And in this moment, he knows they love him, and he knows their hearts are for him, but he also knows they're going to fall away. This is why, first of all, Jesus is the only one that can do it, because we, in our pride and our ego and our fear, right, we fall away. And he didn't, right? He stayed obedient. He went through, he went forward. But because he did that, we can all follow him, right? He's the first fruit. He did it first. And so we all can have hope, and we can have faith, we can endure, because we're like, okay, Jesus did it first. But anyway, just how does it show his grace? And how does it encourage you? How does it encourage you today, knowing that he knows your weaknesses? He's taken them into consideration, and he still gave you life. You know what I mean? He didn't give you life and then go, oh my gosh, he's not surprised. He's not like, well, now I don't know what to do. What a waste. He knows it and loves you anyway, chose you anyway, can use you anyway, can work with you and partner with you and accomplish through you anyway. Like I said with Peter, when he says Satan has asked to sift you, and when he does, and you come out the other side, right, when your faith stands, you'll be able to help others. So just being able to go through your own testimony, go through your heartbreak, your suffering, the consequences of your own actions, keeping your faith, coming out the other side, and it being okay. But that God knows our weakness, and his grace chooses us anyway. And so no, he chooses you anyway, knowing everything you've done. He chooses me. He's chosen me, knowing everything I've done. And anyone that tries to act like or tell you that they haven't done anything is just a liar, right? They're either pathological, they believe their own lie, or they have just brushed things under the rug and they are in denial. But all of us are human. Okay, so Peter insists that he will never deny Jesus. This is a great question. It highlighted it for me in a way that I hadn't thought of. Because what does this teach us about pride and self-reliance in our faith? Because I was mentioning, I mean, first of all, just Peter being antagonistic, like he's arguing with the Lord again, but also just thinking like, that's how, I mean, I guess I did kind of think of arrogance. Like that's how highly he thinks of himself. Like I could never, but also just he loves the Lord and he genuinely believes that he wouldn't. But for this to be smart enough in this question to tap into, do you hear the pride there? Because pride is a tough one to identify. And so to hear it in that, the pride coming out in that says, I would never. And it's like, who do you think you are? You are a human. There is human weakness. There is frailty. Like, you don't know. You need the Lord. That's why also when it says self-reliance, this whole thing of I won't fail. When you try to do it on your own, you will. Only with the Lord, only being like, I know I'm too weak to do it on my own, and being like, I need the Lord, is how you keep the faith. Because in those moments, right, his power is made perfect in our weakness. In those moments when you're weak and you have nothing to give, you cry out to him, you turn to him, you depend on him. But if you depend on yourself, if you think you have enough faith, you have enough discipline to get through it, you're missing it. You're never going to have enough faith or discipline to get through it. And like I've said before, I've recorded this video so many times that I'm not sure if I already said this. But the word pistis, faith, means God's persuasion, right? God convinces us. He puts the confidence in us. John Lennox said this very well, where he was like, I trust my wife, not because I just do, but because she's earned my trust, right? She is consistent and faithful enough that I have confidence in her. I also think about with a chair. If you go to sit on a chair, you don't doubt every single chair you sit on if it's going to hold you or not. You have confidence that chairs are going to hold you. And maybe even if a chair breaks, like, you don't just all of a sudden think every chair is going to break. So why do you have that level of confidence? You have it in the chair, right? But so anyway, just because of the faithfulness, it's like God has been faithful. God has proven himself in our story. God is the one that builds our faith. That is part of the definition of the word faith, right? It's that he does the building. So for us to think we're going to somehow, that's why Peter failed. That makes sense. That's why he failed, because he was going into it, and this is what he learned about it. He was going into it thinking, my faith, I will hold on to faith. And what he had to learn in it was, you in the moments of fear can't muster up enough faith. You don't have enough discipline. You cannot rely on yourself in those moments. The only thing you could do would be to have the Lord, would be to turn to the Lord and say, I literally have nothing right now. I'm scared. I need you to hold me. I need you to pull me through. I need you to lead me. That's the only way we're going to do it. So anyway, that makes sense. That's a light bulb. That's why he failed. He needed to experience that version of faith was not enough, was not actual faith. Okay, so then Jesus, deeply distressed, right? And I talked about how the word trouble and tribulation are the same word, and it means it's in your mind, right? It's this feeling of being trapped. You're not actually trapped, but it's like you understand the situation. The situation is a trap, right? And so I've talked about how it's like your body isn't physically like enclosed, but we know what this is like when a situation is lining up like a chessboard, or like the dominoes are lining up, and you're seeing what's coming, and you're like, I'm trapped. I feel trapped. I don't know a way out. But what he learns in the garden, or experiences in the garden, and is something for us, is that there is a way, but sometimes there's only one way. Oftentimes there's only one way. I guess always there's only one way. The Lord is the way. It's the way he's designed. Anything else we can say, oh, there's another way out. And you take that way, and it ends up being like you hit a wall. So it's like you thought it was a way out, but it ultimately wasn't a way out, right? There's only one way out. And that's why we just follow the Lord. Show me the way out. And when we try to take it into our own hands, it's like a maze. You can go through all these things and take a few steps. You might take 5 steps. You might take 50 steps until you hit the next wall, the roadblock. And you have to come back around. So our deception is we start taking some forward steps and we think we found another way until we hit the wall in the maze. You have to come back. There's only one way out of a maze, right? So the Lord is the one that's going to guide us and get us there. But anyway, just that there's only one way out. And this is what he's doing in the garden, is he's saying, is there another way? And the answer is no. The answer is there is a way. And so sometimes in our situations, we want there to be more than one way out. What I said in the video yesterday was like, we want to be able to take the door or the window, right? And God's like, you got to take the window, right? The door, they're banging on the door. You can't go out that way. Like, you're going to get caught if you go out that way. You've got to go out the window, right? And so we want there to be more than one way. And sometimes there's only one. And that's why in that moment, it's like, you've got to take the one and be grateful for the one. And that's why even with this, Jesus, the cross was the only way. He's headed to the cross and he's saying, is there another way? And it's like, no, this is the way. But he goes through the way. It is the only way. And he steps forward and goes through it. And so, I'm sure you've heard the saying, the only way out is through. And there's a song by Judah that says it's not about getting over, it's about getting through. Because he said, like, something about like, if you want it, you don't just build a bridge so I can get over it, right? Like, you don't just help me get over my problems. I've got to go through them. And that's the part we try to avoid. We feel trapped because our problem, it's the Red Sea, right? It's coming up right in front of us. We don't realize we have to go through it in faith, and we want to avoid it. We want to run from it. We want to find another way out of it. And the only way out is to go forward. And you've got to just take the steps forward and go through and trust the Lord. And like, time is going to pass anyway. Like, change is going to come anyway. Like, you're basically going to get forced to be pushed forward, versus the step of faith is like, you go first, you trust, you know, right? That there is a way. Like I said, sometimes there's only one way, and that one way is like, you have got to just go forward and endure and bear the humiliation, bear the shame, bear the, like, whatever it is, like the scariness of it. Like, you've got to just go forward. You've got to go through it. So with Jesus, right, we're seeing his humanity. He's showing us what it's like to be in those moments and feel trapped and be obedient, to go through and go forward, right? Because he's also showing us his obedience. And he's showing us that humanity can be obedient. That in our rebellion, though we want to be disobedient, we want there to be another way, we want to escape, you also can just as much choose obedience, right? You can choose to run from the problems, or you can choose to go through them. And that he's showing us. That's why I said he's God revealed. He's revealing the way. The way is to go through it. The way is to go to the cross, to crucify yourself, to carry your tool of shame, to die to yourself so you can have resurrection power, so you are yielded and you are not ego. Ego is what separates us from God, right? Ego is what happened from the beginning, the pride, the independence. I can do this by myself. Yielding, union, even marriage, to becoming one flesh. You cannot maintain self. And if you're a branch connected to a root system, a tree, you're not maintaining self. The branch doesn't get to stay isolated. There is a union. There is a constant stream of energy, of nutrition coming from the root system through the branch and out into fruit. And that's the proper design. That is the righteousness. As a branch, we do not get to be independent and say, I want to still be here and bear my own fruit, but I don't want the root system, right? And the root system is the Lord. That's why he says it's a branch that's broken off. If you've broken off and you're just this independent branch, you can't do anything, right? There is no bearing fruit. And then he's grafted us back in. But the yielding, the union, is being open, being surrendered, being available, and letting him flow through you, right? You receive love from him, you get filled up with love, and you overflow with love. And like, this is the proper flow, is the best word I can come up with. And then also talking about his will, right? So he says, not what I will, but what you will. And realizing that nothing is going, if you are unwilling to do something, right? And that's like what disobedience is God calls you to do something and you're either willing or unwilling. And I've talked about this with employment. They say, never hire an unwilling employee. Even if they are the smartest, most educated, most experienced person, if they are able and unwilling, it's not worth it. It's better to get someone who's unable, right? They do not have the skills, they do not have the experience, but they are willing. Because that person is coachable, teachable, right? You always want willing people. And so with this, it's like, we determine if we're willing or unwilling, right? It's our will. It's part of our psyche. We have our mind, our heart, and our will. And so in this, we either have our will be aligned with the Lord, which is the union, right? Connecting to the root system, or we have our will be against the Lord, which is independence, which is, I don't want to do what you said. And so in this, Jesus is saying, I'm willing. I am willing to go forward. I am willing to proceed through the door that's in front of me, the only way to get out, right? Because you have two options. And I'm thinking about like a movie. If you're trapped, you can either just stay trapped and cry and die ultimately, I guess, or you can move forward. And even if you move forward toward your death still, because it's inevitable, but there's like more to it. It's like you tried, you went, you accomplished more. Maybe you saved someone along the way. Maybe other people like learn their lesson, right? You climb out the window and they finally bust through the door and all those people are like, oh, what now? And I don't even know. The story at least continues, right? There's more movement. There's more flow. God gets to open more doors, or, accomplish more through you in your time, right? Because it's like, you're available, you're operative, you're responding, you're stepping in faith. But so anyway, that Jesus in this moment shows us that we have will and we get to choose if we are willing or unwilling. And he shows us that his will, he says, I am willing, right? I align with your will. And so how can we apply this attitude of surrender to our own lives or in our own lives? This attitude of surrender, everything I just said, right? Yielding and saying, flow through me, show me, guide me. I'm not going to block you off. I'm not going to be independent and try to do it on my own. I'm not going to sit here and stare at the door and the window and then think, basically just waste time and sit there and think, is there a third way? And then before you know it, game over. Or, trying to dig a hole. Like, I guess that'd be a third way, right? It's like, just go. You hear the cue, you hear the call. He says what to do, go, right? No hesitation, do it. Respond, move, think about it later kind of thing. But it's like, trust the Spirit, right? Have that yielded. You don't have to understand. You don't have to figure it out. You can't figure it out. You don't have all the answers. Okay, and then the disciples keep falling asleep, right? So Jesus is praying, and this is yet again showing us human weakness, right? But the human weakness of our flesh versus spiritual alertness, right? So he says the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Willing. The spirit is willing. The spirit is what knows the Lord. The spirit is the Lord, right? So it's like the spirit is willing, but our flesh is what's like, can't keep up. And this is why would you let your flesh lead you? The spirit is clearly the one that should be operating the ship, and the flesh just needs to get in check. This question says, what practices can help us stay spiritually vigilant instead of spiritually asleep? So even understanding that spiritually vigilant versus spiritually asleep. So we hear in this story that they are physically asleep, but also understanding what it means to be spiritually asleep. And when he's saying pray, right? Pray so that you don't fall into temptation. That he knows before all of this even happens, they need to be prayed up. Whether it's that they're praying for the Lord, praying for themselves, praying for Judas, praying for Rome, like, I don't know, but just praying. But I think because too, it's like they're about to enter a situation. They don't even know what's coming yet. When Jesus knows, again, they're going to fall away, but it is going to be hard to watch him go to the cross. They're about to watch him get arrested. They're about to watch him get mocked. They're about to watch him get flogged, watch him go to the cross. That rather than just praying yourself out of situations when you're in the middle of them, pray before they come. And again, you might not even know what's coming, right? He's telling them to pray in the garden. They don't even know he's about to get arrested. He didn't say pray because I'm about to be arrested. He just said pray. But it's like praying before you enter it so that they could be prepared and be equipped and maybe have handled the situation differently, right? If they're prayed up, maybe they wouldn't have fled from the cross. Maybe they wouldn't have denied Christ. Maybe they wouldn't, right? It's like they wouldn't have been in their flesh. They would have had the spirit filled. They would have had been in alignment with God and been like, whoa, something bigger is happening here. I remember Jesus said this was going to happen. I remember Jesus said this 3 times. Now this makes sense. It's happening. Oh my gosh, actually, those scriptures I grew up with are being fulfilled. We're in it right now. They would have this spiritual understanding to where when their flesh was freaking out of like Jesus is getting arrested, or oh my gosh, what's going to happen, or he's dying, all those fleshly things that where your mind starts to spin. It's like when you pray and realize the spiritual things going on. This is why, again, it's saying spiritually vigilant versus spiritually asleep, right? So prayer activating that. I also think of fasting activating that, because you cut off your flesh. You learn to say no to your flesh. When it starts to have its voice, you think, I recognize that voice and I don't like it. Like, you have temper tantrums and you try to make me go stir crazy, and that's not how the Lord operates. And you want to get yourself back into this place of like spiritual soundness, right? Like a sound mind. Self-control is a fruit of the Spirit, meaning that you're balanced and you're regulated, and you're just like, almost feel like it's like having a paperweight. It's like when you put a paperweight on a book and it stays down. And so being grounded. So practices of prayer and fasting, which, he mentions prayer, to stay spiritually vigilant instead of spiritually asleep. Just think about that. What does it mean to be spiritually asleep? Where, like I said, I guess maybe you just don't see what is happening spiritually. You've kind of like tuned out, or you're kind of just back into flesh mode. You're back into what's happening in front of you, and you're forgetting that there's a bigger picture. You're forgetting that everything is unseen first, and then it produces itself, right? It emerges, it comes forth from the unseen into the seen, into the physical. And so when you just get so stuck on operating in the physical, you're like delayed, basically. Wow, that's a revelation for me too. If you're only reacting and responding to the physical, you're delayed, you're behind. Because the things have already happened. This is why he says it's spiritual warfare. Pray, armor up in the spirit, fight in the spirit, because you're fighting it before it comes forth. If you are only reacting in the physical, you are behind, right? It is reactive, not proactive. Prayer and spiritual is proactive. And you can get a glimpse in the spirit so that before things are coming in the physical, and you can handle them differently in the physical. Or again, you just have clarity on them. You don't get all reactive and all thrown off by what you see in the physical, right? Um, okay, so Judas betrays with a kiss. How does this reflect the way sin can disguise itself as something good? I don't think this is an example of sin disguising itself as something good. I think this is an example of pretense and hypocrisy. And I think about in Proverbs where it says, greater are the wounds of a friend than the like flattery of an enemy or something like that. So I think about that, like flattery and kisses and fakeness and all of that. And to say it is so much better to have truth that stings than it is to have kisses that are lies. And so that's what this is, right? It was a lie that was packaged. And so just, I think with us, our discernment, it comes back to that spiritual awakeness, right? You know, what is this teaching? I mean, oh gosh, no, I'll get to a question, but I think about spiritual awakeness and to be able to discern that someone is lying to you almost because of how sweet it is. I've talked about the difference between fruit and sugar, right? Know what fruit tastes like. So when you have sugar, like candy is what I mean. Sorry, candy, you're like something that's different. This is fake. This is manufactured. It's trying too hard, right? It's overcompensating. And it's like, I don't like it. It hurts my cheeks. Like, you know what I mean? And my teeth and cavities and all of that. And it makes me sick. Like, recognizing that versus wanting more of that and the addictive behavior to candy of like, ooh, I like this, I want this, and playing the fake game, being like, I don't like this. But realizing that, walking around through your life and realizing that there are enemies that are kissing you. And so to have the spiritual discernment to want truth more than you want the lie, to realize when someone's telling you the truth, they love you and they're for you, right? And you sharpen each other together and you encourage each other. But in this, I think about with Jesus too, how Jesus let Judas get so close. Talked about in the Bible study, but he let Judas kiss him. And that is just something to learn. When we talk about being like Christ, and it's like rather than us pushing people away, it's like letting them. Because what I was saying too in the Bible study was that he let Judas feel the full like conscience, guilty conscience of what he was doing, rather than stopping him and being like, hey, buddy, like, you know, just he's let him go through the entire experience of this guilt, which at any point in time could have convicted him and he could have changed, right? But he kept not changing. That's the hard part with the free will is you have these moments and these opportunities along the way to change, but every time you don't, every time you continue to resist it, you're just solidifying your stance. You're saying, I want this. I'm not getting out. And like I've said too, sometimes it's hard because I've been in that where it's like, I didn't even know how to get out. I'm like, Lord, I don't want this, but I feel stuck. I feel like I've already committed. I don't know how to get out. But even having those conversations with him is showing that like, I know him and who he is and I need his help. But anyway, yeah, just paying attention. And like I said, and then I guess just knowing too, that like betrayal is a thing. And when you really get to a point where you don't have ego and you don't have self-preservation, it's almost like you let them kiss you. You still have your discernment. Jesus knew what was happening the whole time. So it's like you have your discernment, but you don't have to, I guess, do something about it. And that's the hard part because we try to take justice into our own hands. And I think that I'm about to get that too. Yeah, with the defense, when Peter tries to defend with the sword and cuts his ear or whatever, it's like, what does this reveal about human instinct versus God's plan? And it makes me think about human defensiveness with injustice. Like we try to serve justice. And the Lord says, vengeance is mine, right? I will avenge. I am your defense. I go before you. I fight the battles. The battles are mine, right? Like, and we see wrongdoing and want to take it into our own hands. And it's interesting too, because we say there's wickedness in the world and why won't God do anything about it? But then when God says he will do something about it, right? You don't handle it all at once. When he says, let the wheat and the weeds grow together, and then at the right time I will harvest and I will separate them. So he's got his timing of how he will handle it all at the same time, because we're all in different seasons, right? It's like, that's why it's like we're all born at different times, different generations, different seasons happening together. And again, too, I love Frank Turek said this, if God were to just wipe out all the wickedness right now, he'd wipe all of us out, right? Like, it's like we're all doing it. Like everyone that's ever been born in some way has done something. So him giving a chance for confession and repentance and all of that, where he says, I'm not slow to keep my promises. I'm patient because I want none to perish, right? He does not want us to perish. But that we want to see justice here and now. And so we try to take justice into our own hands. And so just what that reveals about our human instinct, our reactiveness. And it's so funny because we want to serve justice, but we don't like when justice is served on us. When we see someone do something wrong, we want to judge, we want to cut their ear or whatever, we want to react. But then if we do something wrong, we don't want that same thing to happen to us, right? This is where it's, I guess the word would be hypocritical, but it's like, what is there another word that I'm thinking? I don't know. But just, I don't even know. I mean, I said it and it makes sense. How we want grace and favor and mercy shown for us, but not for others, right? But anyway, just that versus God's plan, right? It's like us trying to step in, and it just, again, it's hard, but to realize it's like hands off. God's plan, let it happen, let it play out. If you lose the thing, if you lose your life, if you lose your reputation, if you lose it. But if you gain these things too, gain them. Like, let the Lord's plan happen, and we keep trying to steer the ship. And so then in verse 50, all the disciples flee. So they flee when he gets arrested. What does this reveal about human fear and faith under pressure? Right? It's showing when fear comes out. That's why I said, like, we think we have faith until we're pressed, until we're proven. Whether you're an olive and you get pressed and olive oil comes out, you're a grape and you get pressed, right? For wine, it's like what's inside of you comes out when you're pressed. So we don't like pressure, but pressure is good because pressure proves ourselves. And we either prove that we are who we say we are, and we prove to ourselves, oh my gosh, okay, or we prove to ourselves things we don't want to see and we don't like. And that's why most people don't like pressure. They don't want to be pressed because they don't want to see the truth of who they really are, but it needs to be proven, because then that's where justice comes in. If we always hide in our heart and say on the outside, like, oh yeah, I'm like this, and then we get pressed, right? We don't want the heart to be exposed, because we want to be able to convince ourselves and everyone else that our heart is a certain way. And so the Lord's like, let's prove it, because then when it's proven, that's where humility comes in. That's where we realize, oh my gosh, I need grace, I need mercy, I need forgiveness, right? That's where all of that comes into play, is the honesty with yourself. You can start to have pride if what's inside of you doesn't get pressed out. But when it's proven is when you are aware of your human weakness and you are aware of your need for grace. And you, again, just prove to yourself, like, you can't do this alone. You're not doing a good job. You need the Lord. And so that constant, that's why I love all the metaphors of like, break yourself open like an alabaster jar, like just break open, be pressed, and let it all come out, and keep letting it rise to the surface. You can keep giving it to the Lord and be like, I don't even want to hide it. I don't even want to hold on to it. I don't want to hide it. I don't want to pretend. Always constantly bring it all to the surface, right? This is that stream again, that flow of surrender. Always constantly bring it to the surface so we can address it. And I can prove to myself, and I can reveal to myself the areas that I haven't given to you, the areas where I'm still prideful, the areas where I'm still fleshly and I need to be transformed. I haven't let you in, right? Rather than us hiding and pretending like they're not there. How do we sometimes abandon our faith in moments of crisis? So think about yourself. How do you abandon your faith in moments of crisis? Right? It's like basically saying you lose your confidence. And I think about this because then it says, how can you strengthen your trust in God? And again, you don't. God strengthens his trust in you. So I think the question is, do you trust God? Because you either do or you don't. You either have confidence or you don't. Now, we each have our own amount, I guess I would say, of confidence. Some have a capacity for more than others. Depends on your testimony, his faithfulness, how much confidence that he's, well, like, this is the thing. He's given us all confidence. We all live in the same world. We all see the same God. But it's like those of us that have confidence in that, we look and our eyes are open and we go, wow, I have no doubt I have confidence in you. Because I was saying this to a college student the other day. She was like, it's just hard sometimes to try to take control. And I hear that a lot. People try to take control. I just try to take control. And I go, because she was like, if it doesn't seem to be working out my way, or God, I don't know how he's doing it. So I just try to, make things happen. And I go, you trust yourself? Like, if you have to pick who you trust you? Like, have you ever seen yourself, listened to yourself, like, lived a day in your own life? Like, what are you talking about? Like, we do not keep our word. We do not know, like, or understand things that are going on. We judge, we criticize, we shame, we go astray. All this stuff, even trying to take control is an example, but just like, why would you ever trust yourself more than God? And I think it's like, I trust God 80% of the time, but there's 20% of things that I trust myself more in. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. You have to pick what you trust 100%, right? You don't get to trust God 99% of the time, but in this one area, you trust yourself because you think, I know that I'm not trustworthy all the time, but in this area, I'm trustworthy. Nope. If you're not trustworthy all the time, then you are not trustworthy in that area, right? You're not trustworthy in any area. You can't be 100% trustworthy in some areas and then 0% trustworthy in others. It all adds up. You are either 100% trustworthy all the time or you are not, because you're going to put faith in yourself in that one instance and you're going to fall short in that too and just show that you're human. So what can you trust 100% of the time? And that's where the confidence comes from. God is the only thing I can trust 100% of the time, even when I don't understand it, even when I haven't seen this certain area yet. Like maybe I've seen God heal sickness before, but I've never seen him show up financially. Or the opposite. I've seen him show up financially, but I've never seen him heal sickness, right? So it's like some of it I might not have experienced yet, but I have 100% confidence that he's going to show up every time because I don't have another option. I'm not going to put confidence that I'm going to show up every time. I'm definitely not going to put confidence that anybody else is going to show up every time. Right? So just, do you trust God? Because to abandon your faith, to lose your confidence, means you don't. Right? And like what Peter did, you start to put your confidence in yourself, that you are going to keep your faith, versus having the confidence in the Lord, in his plan, how it's all working out. Right? So do you trust God? And write that down, right? I trust God 100%. Okay, so the religious leaders, right? They're determined to condemn Jesus, which is crazy. It doesn't matter that they have false testimony. It doesn't matter that they can't find anything, right? And it's basically to fulfill prophecy, because it's like, it doesn't make sense otherwise. Why the heck are they so determined? And not just determined to arrest him, determined to kill him. Like, what is going on? Like I said, Jesus is saying, because it's written. You don't even realize you're in the middle of prophecy right now. Like, that's what's crazy too. It's like, don't you see you're fulfilling the scriptures? Like I said this in the video that didn't work, I think. Like I said, I can't tell if I've repeated myself 4 times or if some of this got thrown away, and so it's the first time I'm saying it, to y'all. But I was like, if someone told you that, today, like in the past, right? Someone was like, on this day, you are going to, run out of gas and need to go to the gas station. And then you're going to go inside and you're going to be looking for, an energy drink. But because they don't have the flavor you're looking for, you had to buy something different than normal. And then when you're checking out, you realize you don't have cash. And so you have to use your credit card. If you're sitting there at the gas station holding the energy drink, swiping the credit card, wouldn't you be like, oh my gosh, this is everything that they said? I ran out of gas today. I went to get the drink, right? It's like, but do you even realize when you're living in it? Just like people say, like, you're living in prayers you've prayed before. It's like, do you realize you're living in prayers you've prayed before? Do you realize that this has been spoken over your life and you're in the middle of it? Like, they are in prophecy. How, as it's happening, are they not realizing? And I think it's just because they don't want it to be true, which that's the saddest part about a hardened heart and a deluded mind, is like, you can be in truth and you just don't want it to be true. And so you just are fighting it and resisting it. And it doesn't even matter. And these are the people that are supposed to love their scriptures. They don't even care that their scriptures are coming true because, like I said, they're threatened by it. But so Jesus remains silent for much of the trial. And what does this teach us about wisdom, self-control, and trust in God's plan? So wisdom, right? He's staying silent. They have all these false testimonies. And this is why, like I said, let them lie. Let them share their false testimonies. Right? It's like, you don't have to step in to prove them wrong. What they're saying proves itself wrong. Just let them keep talking, right? Let them get questioned. And then when they don't have answers to the questions or it doesn't line up, so he's silent. It teaches us about wisdom, self-control, right? So a sound mind in those moments, being balanced and regulated. And like I said, that's what the word means. It's like phaneroo in Greek. And it's the same thing as self-control. It means a sound mind. It means balanced, regulated. I'm trying to think of what else. But basically just like holistic, right? But self-control being a fruit of the Spirit. That there is this steadfastness. And when I think of sound mind, I just think of the opposite of chaotic and the opposite of manic and anxious, right? And trust in God's plan. He knows he's in the middle of it. He also knows he's about to give them the answer. He's about to hand himself over the cross, but he's watching this scene and he's letting it play out. So it could be written and we would see, oh my gosh, they have nothing against him. So he's not speaking. And then when he finally does speak, it's going to be the power statement that shows everyone that Jesus hands himself over. No one had anything against him. Right? And so he says, I am the Son of Man. I will be coming on the clouds. And how this is fulfilling prophecy. It's an Old Testament prophecy. It's Daniel 7:13-14. This is what, like I said, how did they not know in that moment? This is what the Messiah would say. They know that this is what the Messiah would say, but as he's saying it, they're saying, how blasphemous. You're saying something the Messiah would say, but you're not the Messiah. And he's like, no, but I'm saying I am the Messiah. I was born of a virgin, which was prophesied. I was born in Bethlehem, which was prophesied. I rode on a colt, which was prophesied. Like, everything is fulfilled. I came from Egypt, right? Because they left Bethlehem and used the wise men's like treasure, and they go stay in Egypt. So he comes out of Egypt. It's like all these things. I'm a Galilean. I'm a Nazarene. All these things, and you just won't see it. It's crazy. Right? So what is it? It's like, I mean, obvious. It reveals that they misunderstand his identity. Why do you think Peter, who had been so bold, denies him 3 times? I think that's interesting. Why do you think Peter? I would say this too. Peter's the only one that followed, though. When he got arrested, it says Peter followed behind. So, like, watch. So he got himself close to the fire, but then when he started feeling the heat, why do you think Peter specifically, who was so bold, saying, I would never, deny Jesus? Right? Why do you think he denied Jesus? And so then how does fear influence us under pressure? Because fear and faith can't live in the same, like they can't both happen at the same time, right? Fear is a lack of confidence. Faith is confidence. So it's like, why do we lose our confidence in moments of pressure, right? In fear. Why does fear come up? Because Jesus said, I came so that there'd be no fear in death. And so what are we afraid of? What's the worst that could happen? The 2 things I always think of that are the worst that could happen would be that you lose all your possessions. But Jesus was homeless. He showed us, he told all his followers to leave their possessions behind and follow him and show we can live this way. You live off the generosity of others. Like, I'm showing you that I have nothing. Adam and Eve had nothing. All they were given was the earth, and they were in paradise, right? So now we are so afraid of being homeless because of the way we've created infrastructure and economy. But Adam and Eve had nothing. And so anyway, we're afraid we're going to lose our possessions. You know, is it afraid you're afraid you're going to lose your popularity, your status, your career, your reputation? Like, what are you afraid of? Because we also know now there's no fear in death. So what are we afraid of? Ask yourself that. What are you afraid of? Okay, so Peter's 3rd denial, the rooster crows, right? In this moment, what does it teach us about the conviction of sin and repentance? So that Jesus let it happen so Peter would feel the conviction of sin, right? Similarly to Judas, but it was like, rather than saving them from this, and when we ask, Lord, why do you let me feel this suffering? Why do you let me feel this? I feel guilty. And it's like, that's a good thing, right? The word suffering means the privilege to feel. Look it up. Look it up in Strong's Concordance. It's the privilege to feel. It is the weightiness, the heaviness, the capacity of feeling everything fully. We love feeling good emotions fully. We do not like feeling bad emotions fully, but it's a gift to be able to feel them fully. Because in this, you're convicted. Your heart is broken by what you've done. And that's a good thing to get to that point, to feel that, right? Because then what does it do? It opens up the door for repentance. It's you saying, I turned away from you, Lord, and that felt really bad, and I want to turn back. But what's cool is the Lord's shown us you can turn back. Come home, you can turn back. That was the mistake Adam made from the beginning, was he didn't turn back. He dug his hole deeper. Stubbornness. He turned from the Lord, and then when the Lord was like, where are you? He was like, I don't want to come back. And what's true in our heart is that we do want to come back, but we are afraid to come back. We don't want to be judged. We think we're not welcomed back. And so we just tell ourselves we like this decision over here. But Adam could have repented and come back and said, Lord, I'm sorry. He lost it all anyway. It's like, what's the worst that was going to happen? And he doesn't know that the Lord wouldn't have reconciled it right then, but he's afraid of being judged. But you already got judged. You got the condemnation. You've got the consequence on your action. So it's like, what worse was going to happen? But you also kicked God out of your heart in that too. But anyway, this moment teaching us about the conviction of sin. Think about that moment when he realized Jesus was right, when he failed, and everything he said about himself and thought right when it was pressed out of him. But what does this teach us about getting to the point where we're convicted by our sin and how it leads to repentance? And then it says, how does Peter's betrayal or Peter's failure contrast with Judas's betrayal? If you don't know yet, because if you haven't read it, Peter gets restored, gets forgiven because he sticks around. Judas doesn't. Judas unalives himself, so he doesn't get to be forgiven. He doesn't get to see the Lord again. But Peter does. Peter waits around and endures that suffering, that heartbreak, that pain, that guilt of just harping on what he's just done, probably dragging his feet, being embarrassed, feeling just like the worst. Right? But his failure and how it's different from Judas's betrayal. And what I think of is that Peter did love Jesus, right? Peter loved Jesus. He lied to the crowd, right? Whereas Judas lied to Jesus. Judas lied to Jesus. His heart wasn't really for him, and he was pretending to Jesus. Peter loved Jesus, and he got scared, and he lied to the crowd, right? It's like he didn't really mean it when he's denying Jesus. He loves Jesus. He was running to Jesus's tomb, right? It's like that's what the Lord knew, was like, you love me, but you are going to get scared and you are going to lie. But he wasn't lying to Jesus. He was lying to people. So that's the difference, is their heart. Who really had love for Jesus, right? And Peter did, and Judas didn't. And so just when you look at all of this, what Jesus went through, him knowing, him in the garden, right? Him saying, I'm going to break my body and my blood will be shed. He's headed to the cross and he knows. He lets Judas kiss him and say, what does he say? Oh my gosh, what was I about to say? I don't even know. But just basically, Jesus is headed to the cross. He hands himself over to the council. He lets himself get arrested. He knows all of this is happening. He lets himself be betrayed, I guess is what I was going to say. But so how does this strengthen your understanding of Jesus's love and sacrifice for you? Right? Not just for them, not just for me, not just for everyone around you, but his grace in your weakness, that he headed to the cross knowing this was the only way. He was willing, right? He knew he'd come out the other side, but he had to go through it. Just like us, we know we're going to come out the other side. And he says, just like a pregnant woman in labor gives birth for the joy on the other side. And it's like he endured the cross for the joy on the other side. So there is the other side. But for us to get to the other side we've got to go through it. We've got to go through what's in front of us. So that Jesus went through all of this for us so we could follow him. So we can follow him through to the other side, right? This is everything. This is the gospel. This is the good news. This is the freedom. This is the hope that we have. So just how this strengthens your understanding of Jesus's love and sacrifice for you. Okay. I love you guys. I don't know why this one was so long, but I guess it's because it's Jesus. Honestly, it was a long chapter. It was almost like a 2-hour, I think, Bible study, because Peter crammed it all in one chapter, and it's like the entire Holy Week, and it's everything. Like it's the gospel. It is what Jesus is doing heading to the cross. It is so significant. So I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video, which is like now, basically, for Mark chapter 15. Bye.